All right, welcome everybody to this class. It is titled Raja Yoga, which is the yoga of meditation or discipline. And this is a picture from the book written by Swami, well, not necessarily written by him, but and this is a piece that I wanted to share that I'm not sure if a lot of people knew, but Swami Vivekananda never wrote any books. So it's a misnomer to say that he wrote it. If you see inside of this book, it says Raja Yoga being lectures by Swami Vivekananda. And so pretty much what they did was they just transcribed his lectures into books. So he never wrote any books on his own. They just took his lectures and they wrote them down. And with this particular book, this Raja Yoga book, they wanted to have a book on Raja Yoga. And so what they did, they went to him and said, hey, we want to write a book. So can you dictate to us what Raja Yoga is? And so basically what he did was he sat back, he went into meditation, and he spit the whole book. And just to give you a idea of how long it is, if you listen to the audio book, it's 8 hours long. And so he said the book all the way through, just through his knowledge and through meditation. So he didn't necessarily write it. So that's why this says lectures by Swami Vivekananda and not written by Swami Vivekananda. All right. Somebody read this for me, please. This is talking about Raja Yoga.
I can. Raja Yoga is one of the 4 classical schools of yoga. Raja comes from the Sanskrit Rajan and is a title for a monarch in India. Raja means king or royal, referring to the status of Raja Yoga as a royal path or principal form of yoga. Raja Yoga is the yoga of mind and body control with the focus of meditation. It encompasses teaching from all different paths, and it is Raja Yoga that hatha yoga and modern Asana practice developed. Since Raja Yoga involves all 3 dimensions of human existence, physical, mental, and spiritual, it enables practitioners to achieve harmony on all these levels.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, when we mention hatha yoga and modern asana practice, that is, normally what people talk about when they talk about yoga. So just the different body postures and positions, that's hatha yoga and asana practice. And that is one of the limbs inside of Raja Yoga. So that's where that practice came from, if anybody was wondering. All right, so Raja Yoga, aka King Yoga or Royal Yoga. According to Raja Yoga, the biggest obstacle to self-realization is a busy mind in which excessive thinking, ego, craving, attachment, and the egoic concept of a me, which is individual and separate from the rest of the world. And so if you could think back, you can see how each of the yogas had a quote unquote problem that they sought out to solve. So for example, Karma Yoga, for example, the problem was selfishness. So we resolve selfishness through unselfish action. Or Jnana Yoga, for example, the one we had last week, the problem with that yoga sought to solve was ignorance. So we postulated that, the reason why man or woman is not, in one with God or union, aka yoga, is because they are ignorant to the fact that they are already in union. And so we just have to dissolve that veil of illusion or Maya through knowledge. And so this particular problem that is set forth is that the obstacle is a busy mind. And so through Raja Yoga, we seek to calm or still that busy mind.
I work in Bloomfield Hills, so I have to hook.
All right. So the irony is that these obstacles are actually normal functions of a human mind, which means that if you look at these things, nothing is wrong. You know, when we say the excessive thinking, ego, craving, attachment, and the egoic concept of a me, which is individual and separate from the universe. If you look at pretty much every person you know, you'll see that that is the normal functions of humans. This is what it is to be human. We do always have excessive thinking. We have an ego. We crave things. We have attachment to things or aversion, and we have a concept of me. So that is the normal function of the human mind. Nothing is wrong. But we have forgotten that there is a deeper part of ourselves which comprises the mind, experiences our existence, and love underlies and embraces everything. So to directly experience this is to know the self. So this all stuff that we talked about at first, this is regular human function. And then this but separates where we are going to. So this but is kind of like the bridge between where we are and where we are going. So the way to overcome these obstacles is by calming down the activity of the mind and resting in that with a capital T, which remains when all thinking and patterning of consciousness ceases. This indescribable aspect of existence is often referred to as our true nature or Brahman. A separate sense of self contributes towards our suffering. Working through the mind and body practices outlined in Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga is believed to bring the practitioner close to an enlightened state of consciousness known as Samadhi, in which it is possible to experience the true self. So Raja Yoga is ultimately a means of transcending identification with the mind-body-intellect complex in order to understand the nature of the true self. So all of this basically outlined where we are going in tonight's class. Anybody have any questions or comments on any of this so far? All making sense? Everything straightforward?
Yep. It speaks to the 4 natural enemies, and the fact that they're natural enemies speaks to how subtle they are, because they'll pop up and we'll act on them without even noticing sometimes.
Exactly. Right. Perfect. Anybody else? Questions, comments, anything?
Yeah, I found it interesting that you preface that you highlighted the norms of the human condition. It's normal for the mind to be busy. It's normal for, you to have a preoccupation with yourself, the small me, that pronoun used. However, in order to experience this particular yoga, and correct me if I misspeak, you have to go outside of what's normal.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's what makes it so subtle, the subtleties of it. Because when you find yourself within your norm, thinking, trying, and I'm using this intentionally, so trying to figure it out, it is actually an exercise in futility. And it gives more credence to when you just say be. Because it is within that trying, and I say that intentionally, where we speak against the use of that word, because it is in that word, that usage, where you entertain a lot of folly, you know, a lot of foolishness, where it is the biggest obstacle to your own heightened self-awareness, you know, that heightened self-realization.
Exactly. Now that's a great point, and I hope everybody caught the same thing that you said. And this is very, very intentionally worded, that the biggest obstacle to self-realization is a busy mind in which excessive thinking, ego, craving, attachment, and the egoic concept of a me, which is individual and separate from the rest of the universe. And then the irony of these obstacles are actually normal functions of a human mind. So we can see that even though it's commonplace, it's the biggest obstacle to self-realization. So, you know, in essence, the trap is the way out. But in essence, we're all trapped. But when you identify that you're trapped, that's the only way you can escape. But most people don't know they are trapped, and that's the biggest issue. Thank you for that. And just to let everybody know too, we do have a lot of content and material tonight, so we're gonna be moving through pretty rapidly. So Raja Yoga was masterfully systematized by the great sage Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. It combines the highest from all other yoga disciplines: devotion, right action, physical and mental self-control, and divine communion through scientific techniques of concentration and meditation. The fulfillment of the path, aka God realization, makes all things possible, and it teaches us how to make the mortal immortal. And so that's why I'm glad, it's 32 people on here. We started with over 50, and now we can see that, the class has dwindled down. But I'm sure that all of you on this call are definitely interested in this. How to make the mortal immortal. And that's where we're headed. So thank you all again. I appreciate you all. And again, this work, this royal yoga was separated from, the others. And that's essentially why it's last too, because it is systematized. It's literally a 8-step process, whereas the other ones are not systematized as such. And so this one is directly straightforward. It's literally the formula to making the mortal immortal, or AKA God realization. All right, so here we go. These are what's called the 8 limbs of yoga, AKA Raja Yoga. And we're going to interchange these two words. Ashtanga Yoga, and we talked about that in the intro class. Ashtanga Yoga means 8 limbs of yoga. And so these are the 8 limbs in order. So the first one is Yama, second one Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So these are 8 limbs laid out by Patanjali. Anybody have any questions, comments, anything so far before we move forward? All right, so get started. This is the first, and we are not going into depth with all of these because it'll be a whole lot of stuff that we just don't have time to cover tonight. So we are just going to scratch the surface with all of this stuff. And with with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it's actually great because it is broken down into sutras, aka thought threads. And so with the sutras, they have reference numbers. So this is Sutra 232. And so the Yoga Sutras are only 1,200 words, which is like 7 pages long. So if anybody wants to go back and reference any of this stuff, I left the references in the in the presentation. So if anybody wants to go and check it out, by all means, go ahead. So if you see any of these numbers next to the word, that is a reference to the Yoga Sutras and where you can find it. So the Yoga Sutras are broken down into 4 chapters. And so this is chapter 2, 32. All right, so we're just scratching the surface here, but we'll still get a strong grasp of what we're talking about. So the yamas, the 5 yamas are considered codes of restraint, abstinences, self-regulations, and involve our relationship with the external world and other people. The niyamas have to do with your relationship within yourself. So this is people in the world, and this is relationship with yourself. And the yamas consist of non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, and non-coveting. And the niyamas are purity, contentment, austerity, self-study, and dedication to God or the Lord. So this is behavior in the world, and this is behavior with self. Any questions or comments on any of this so far?
Yes, sir.
This is literally 1 and 2. Go ahead.
Peace, instructor.
Peace.
It's interesting that there's a division or a distinction made, even considering that we are overwhelmed, or I don't want to say overwhelmed, we are submerged in the Maya, and we're constantly fighting or constantly challenged with not perceiving the illusion of separation. So it's interesting that this peace within the world and peace within yourself, there's a distinction made. When is it in essence really one and the same?
It is on a higher level, but on on inside of Maya again, which is the trap that we recognize as a trap. So it's the equivalent of when Neo got pulled out of the matrix, but he still had to go inside of the matrix. And so while in the matrix, aka inside of Maya, there are certain rules and regulations that make the interaction inside of the matrix easier. So this is how we conduct ourselves with and around, quote unquote, other people, or aka inside of the matrix. And this is how we conduct ourselves within ourselves. So where I thought you were going was the basically a direct correlation and similarity between these things and the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, which is, it is very similar. And if you kind of break it down, most of the Eightfold Path is inside of these yamas and niyamas. So again, we have a saying that truth is truth is truth. And this is definitely evidencing that truth is truth is truth, because we find the same thing inside of here and inside of Buddhism with the Eightfold Path.
Thank you, instructor. That's dope.
Yep, thank you. Anybody else? Questions coming?
Yes, I had to, I noted in the yamas, in the Bible, it speaks of, and it makes reference to a peculiar people. And what makes a peculiar people are characteristics of what they don't do. restraints or absences or self-regulations that they place on themselves within the world, right? Elijah Muhammad also referred to the same type of the same concept in saying that we will find our success in the restrictive laws, things that we don't do, certain way that we eat, a certain way that we carry and conduct ourselves in the world. That distinguishes us from others. That's the distinction. That's when you know that you are truly in Yama, or that's when you know you are you're operating as the Bible says, a peculiar people. And as Elijah Muhammad has said to us, in the restrictive laws. So I found that to be, an interesting parallel. It's the same thing.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, like, when we see these things, like we kind of want to look at it as a pyramid. So this number 1 and 2 is the base of the pyramid. So we can't even move forward without this stuff in place. And so on face value, it may seem like, oh yeah, that's pretty easy, not, truthfulness, AKA not lying, or, non-coveting, not stealing. But on further inquiry, for example, the truthfulness piece is not only what you say to another person, but it's also what you say to yourself. And the biggest person that we normally tell lies to is ourselves. And so with that, you can see like, all right, the challenge is now heightened. Or, for example, which, what one that I find very interesting is this one, aparigraha, which is non-coveting. And non-coveting basically means that we don't receive gifts from other people. And, that may sound extreme, but in receiving a gift from another person, you now lose your equanimity. And so if somebody gives you a gift and then you may witness or hear about them doing something that is, not in line with being a peculiar person, then your viewpoint of them may be skewed because they gave you a gift. So it's like, man, that's a nice person because he gave me a gift. So he couldn't have done that. So you can see how it changes or skews the viewpoint of another person by receiving a gift from that person. And so that is a parigraha. And, just in reflection, to me, this particular yoga is probably the most challenging one. And this is just the foundation. This is just number 1 and number 2. So we haven't even got to the rest yet. But yeah, that's definitely a great point. You are recognized by what you don't do. And I mean, me, for example, like not to, use myself, but in using myself, I've never drank or smoked or anything like that. And so, when people, they know that or they see that, everybody else is drinking and I'm not drinking, it's like, man, you're different. And it's because of what I don't do and not what I do. And so I'm sure most people on this call can probably relate to some form of that because we're here on this call and not, out at Belle Isle or not out barbecuing or not eating barbecue for that matter. But yeah, anybody else got any questions or comments before we move on?
Instructor, I'd like to speak to the Yamas and Niyamas.
Yep, go ahead.
So when I teach these, we teach these in teacher trainings, and we give each different student one of these Yamas or Niyamas to practice. And then we also, as teachers, take them on ourselves. And what is incredibly interesting to me about them is, of the 8 limbs of this yoga, they're the only ones that have 5 subtitles or 5 subtexts, right? So the next one, it's like this is the clue of how much work there is to do, and how much work we get to do, I guess is the more positive way to say it. But what I wanted to say about this is like, everyone's like, oh, this is the 10 commandments. Oh, this is, the noble truths. And, referring to Joseph Campbell, this is not new news to us, right? Like, we aren't supposed to, we know coveting someone else's stuff is not going to get us to where we want to go at the end of the day. So I'd like to just embrace these. For me, it's been a constant rewriting of them in my mind at how I can embrace this. And just like you said, your restraints are actually your freedom. You are not going to get pulled over, arrested, thrown out of your car because you were drunk, wasted, whatever. And so these are our freedoms. And I always really think it's important for us to embrace them as freedoms. I don't have to practice martial arts. I don't have to practice yoga. I get to. And so I just wanted to add that there's Ashtanga Yoga, which I've mentioned, we talked about this. It's like salsa and salsa. There's a dance and then there's a food. The type of yoga I teach primarily is the 8 limbs, and it's an asana practice. And the guru of this system out of Mysore, India, believed we had to go to the 3rd limb, which is asana, which is yoga practice, the physical hatha yoga practice, to get to 1 and 2, because we had to, I say, wring ourselves out. So that is partly why the posture practices are became more popularized and hijacked in many ways, because not many were going to show up on a call like this or on a Tuesday night, Friday night, Saturday morning they'll come for the postures, but they won't. If you say Yamas and Niyamas, it's going to trickle way down. So I just want to offer that my view of these over time in practicing them, they're always changing. They're multifaceted. There's not just one belief on them. Just as we're human, they're multifaceted. And it's very important to look at them as it's very empowering to say, I get to do these. I get to embrace whatever it is, celibacy or whatever we're choosing to work on at the time. So I just wanted to offer that these are a pathway to freedom within the restraints, which kind of you already said.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. That's a excellent point.
Thank you.
Yep, and that's exactly right. I appreciate that. And that's actually a great point too, in that going to asana first and then coming back to these and using asana as the foundation. It's kind of like a mind trick, because if we start with these, it's like, people might stray away and, oh, that's too, restrictive, and I want to be able to do what I want to do. But if we, get you on the hook with asana, then we can now incorporate this. So it's the exact same thing that we do in martial arts. It's like, all right, you come in, we teach you set position, right cover, left cover, give you a palm heel and a front kick. So it's like, now we got you. And then we introduce the philosophical practice, which is the crux of, what we teach. But we just use the vehicle of martial arts to get people on the hook. So it's the exact same, thing. So I appreciate that example.
Thank you. Yeah, it is the same thing. We're tricksters.
Right. Anybody else? Questions, comments before we move on?
Instructor, I hate to do it because you said you got a lot of content to get through, but I just want to say that I felt the exact opposite when you first mentioned Yama and you talked about abstaining. I had an instant rebellion to it, or instant resistance to the thought of yet more restrictions. But that instantly subsided when you listed off what those specific restrictions were. So this stuff here is, quote unquote, easy for me to walk in, but I just wanted to put that out there that as soon as you said abstinence, I just felt an instant resistance to it. So you don't have to take it no further, but I based on Megan highlighting that the resistance brings freedom, you know, and I love to be considered in the count that Instructor Vaughn spoke on as those peculiar people. And obviously we do live by a number of restrictions that the popular general world does not. Yet and still, being in the fold, I still have to check my ego constantly from being restricted. So
for sure, yeah, thank you for that. And you know, I always appreciate your perspective because you provide more of a human perspective. Like, you know, I mean, just taking myself for example, like, you know, I've been in martial arts for 2/3 of my life. And so like this stuff is not really, you know, it's not really that deep to me. It's like, all right, this is what we're doing, you know what I mean? It's like it's not that deep. But, you know, when you bring that perspective, it's like, you know, I can see things from that different angle. Like, yeah, you know, this might be not necessarily this in particular, but just restrictive laws in general may bring up some resistance because it's like, man, you know, something else that I can't do. But I just love the way Megan framed it. It's like, you know, it's something that we get to do. Like, it's a privilege because, you know, and this is the big piece that, you know, a lot of yogis and gurus and rishis, what they talk about is that us being, you know, quote unquote, human beings, obviously on the path to God realization, is that it is a privilege to practice this stuff because otherwise, what differentiates us from the animals, right? Animals operate off of instinct and feeling good. So they eat when they want to eat, they sleep when they want to sleep, you know, and they do what they do. But if we operate off of those animalistic instincts, then what separates or what differentiates us from the animals? And again, it's these restrictive laws. So, you know, excellent point from both of you. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Questions, comments, anything? All right, moving on. So next, the third rung of this. Can somebody read this for me? You don't have to read the Sanskrit parts. Just read the English.
Third rung of asana, the third of the 8 rungs, 2.29 of yoga is asana, or sitting posture for the later rungs. The word asana comes from the root as, which means to sit. 2.46, the posture asana. Sorry about that. The posture asana for yoga meditation should be steady, stable, and motionless, as well as comfortable. And this is the third of the 8 rungs of yoga. Shra Sukham Asana. 2.47, the means of perfecting the posture is that of relaxing or loosening of effort and allowing attention to merge with endlessness or the infinite. Oh, me. Prayatana.
You don't have to say it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you are good. Yeah, that all of that is the Sanskrit pronunciation. So if you look at this, remember I told you that it's from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So this is from 2.29, 2.46, and 2.47. And so we can see that asana literally means to sit, or it comes from to sit. So it's literally just a posture that is used for meditation, right? And this is literally like the only pieces that are mentioned about asana inside of the Yoga Sutras, which is like, you know, a very, very small portion. So literally like 1% of the entire Yoga Sutras talk about asana practice. And so, but you can see how asana practice is preparation for meditation. So the posture should be steady, stable, and motionless. And it allows for our attention to merge with the infinite. So we'll get more into that, but that is, our third step, which is asana practice, which means to sit, or comes from the root to sit. All right. So continuing on with asana, when activity of all levels of the mind have been transcended. So this is a reference to Yoga Sutra 1.2, which we talked about several times, and we talked about inside of the intro as well. So does anybody remember what Yoga Sutra 1.2 is?
Chitti Vritti Naroda.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly it. So when activity of all levels of the mind have been transcended, aka Chitta Vritti Naroda, we experience pure consciousness. However, the rest of the time, the mind flows toward the many sensory experiences we have, as well as toward the streams of memories and fantasies, aka the vrittis that we talked about. The experience of the external world and the memories is not the problem. Rather, the pure consciousness mistakenly takes on the identity of those thought patterns. In this way, we incorrectly come to think that who we are is one and the same with these thoughts. The solution is to separate the seer and the seen, the experiencer and the object experienced. And this is the theme and the practice of yoga. So this particular slide is literally like if we had to put a slide that encompasses everything that we are about to talk about and have talked about tonight, this would be the one. This is the most important slide in this whole presentation right here. All right, anybody have any questions on the first three? Yama, Niyama, or Asana? Any comments? Anything?
Could the persona be considered a vritti?
Yep. Perfect. We going there.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Excellent observation though. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So the three things that he said when you asked as far as the transcending, where can I find these? The 1.2, 1.3, and things like that?
Yep. So if you just go on Google and you type in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, okay, that's where what all of this is referencing. So it's literally a book written, and most of the books or literature that you'll find that are involving the Yoga Sutras will have some type of commentary, because it's literally only 1,200 words. So the entire Yoga Sutras can fit on like 7 or 8 pages, and it's really, really cryptic. So normally they'll have people who translate, and then they'll have people to explain what the Yoga Sutras are talking about, because otherwise, if you just read it straight through, you'll probably have more questions than answers. So yeah, this is a reference to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So this is literally Sutra 1.2, Sutra 1.3, Sutra 2.17. So yeah, that's what the reference is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question too. I'm sure somebody else probably had the same question. Anybody else? Questions, comments, anything before we move forward? All right. Can somebody read this for me? And you don't have to read the Sanskrit, so you don't have to say this part at the bottom or in the middle.
Fourth rung, Pranayama. The fourth of the 8 rungs, 2.29 of yoga is Pranayama. which is regulating the breath so as to make it slow and subtle, leading to the experience of the steady flow of energy, which is prana, which is beyond or underneath exhalation, inhalation, and the transitions between them. Once that perfected posture has been achieved, the slowing or breaking of the force behind and of unregulated movement of inhalation and exhalation is called breath control and expansion of prana, which leads to the absence of the awareness of both and is the fourth of the 8 rungs. Absence of awareness of breath. At some point, the attention moves inward past the breath. The senses turn inward towards concentration, meditation, and samadhi. In samadhi, the last 3 of the 8 rungs of yoga, when this absence of awareness of breath happens, it is as if one forgets he or she is breathing, although it is not a mere forgetting like when one is absent-minded. Rather, it is a case of transcending breath awareness. This is similar to awareness of the body, falling away when attention becomes absorbed in the breath, and to worldly awareness falling away when attention becomes absorbed in the body and sitting posture. In this synthetic process, attention moves inward through all levels of one's being.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, this is the 4th rung of the 8 rungs, which is pranayama. And so is literally distinguishing that pranayama is not just regulation of breath, but it also leads to the experience of the steady flow of energy, aka prana, which is beyond or underneath the exhalation, the inhalation, and the transition between the two. So if anybody ever gets a chance to check out the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, that or the Raja Yoga book that was dictated by Swami Vivekananda, that's pretty much what they talk about as far as pranayama or the breath, is that it is broken up into 3 parts: the exhalation, the inhalation, and the transition between the two. And so the idea about being intentional about the breath is that we lessen this part. So we are intentional about the exhalation and the inhalation, and there is a very minimal focus on the transition between the two. It's really about the exhalation and the inhalation and being on purpose about that. And so that's pretty much what this is talking about, and that's what they talk about in Raja Yoga, as well as the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And so you can start to see how we are walking towards the idea of the meditation that we teach, you know, at the 36 chamber, because we start everybody off with being intentionally aware of breathing in through the nose, filling up the stomach, and breathing out through the mouth. And, you know, you focus on that, and it allows you to focus the mind on something, right? And then at some point, there is an absence of awareness of the breath. And as we said here, it's not like a absent-minded or getting, but rather a transcendence of breath awareness. So, you know, you are aware for so long, and then at some point, that awareness is gone. You don't need to be aware of it anymore because it happens automatically because you've been so intentional about being aware of the breath. And so that is basically the transcendence between the 4th rung, which is pranayama, and the 5th rung, which is pratyahara. So we talked about posture, which is asana, which is the 3rd rung. Breath is the 4th rung. And then the 5th rung is pratyahara. So since withdrawal or pratyahara rests on the solid foundation of a steady and comfortable meditation posture and smooth, deep, quiet breath that has no pauses. So remember, we talked about being intentional about getting rid of this transition between the two. So that's where that part comes in about no pauses. Without these two steps, sense withdrawal becomes a battle. With posture and breath regulated, pratyahara becomes more natural. And it only makes sense because if we have poor posture, if we aren't aware and on purpose about our breathing, now it makes those things the focus because now we are uncomfortable, now we slouch. So the energy doesn't flow as easily. And so those two things are, prior to getting to pratyahara. And so with that, pratyahara or sense withdrawal becomes more natural. So this is Yoga Sutra 2.54. When the mental organs of the senses and actions cease to be engaged with the corresponding objects in their mental realm and assimilate or turn back into the mind field from which they arose, this is called pratyahara, and it's the fifth step in the eight limbs. Sense withdrawal is a mental function. Withdrawing the senses does not mean just regulating the physical sense organs, such as closing the eyes and sitting still, which is what most people relegate meditation to. The senses are a mental function. And whenever the mental function is drawn to objects of the mind field, there is an active engagement in the senses. It doesn't really matter whether the mental object is coming from the outside, such as through the eyes, so you're literally looking at something, or arising from the memory. It is this internal withdrawal of sensory attention to the mental objects that is the process of pratyahara. So meaning that we are not attaching our senses to anything, but we are turning them in on themselves. So even though we close our eyes, people still, listen for sounds that's outside of themselves. So they are not yet at pratyahara because pratyahara is turning the senses inside and not towards the outside world. All right, so this is literally pratyahara right here. The willingness or unwillingness to withdraw attention from the sensory experience is a significant dividing line between those who experience true meditation and those who experience only physical relaxation. And so a lot of times, we meditate in class and we go around and say, hey, how was meditation? And people will say, oh yeah, I was relaxed and, it was peaceful, et cetera, et cetera. But, meditation is much more than just physical relaxation. So if that's all that's coming about is physical relaxation, then we are not truly experiencing the true meditative practice. And so this picture really signifies pratyahara for me in my mind, because remember we talked about chitta vritti nirodha, and we talked about how the mind or the chitta was like a lake and the vrittis are like waves in the lake. So pratyahara is literally just watching those waves. So, and mind you, this is the fifth out of the 8 rungs. And so, I know a lot of people hear the term being thrown around, mindfulness. This is where mindfulness will come in. So you see it's still way down on, way away from number 8. So it's only number 5. But it's literally us as the observer, and we are now watching the vrittis or the mind fluctuations. And so even though this is very important, and a lot of people will never even get to this step, it's still only number 5 out of 8. But we literally are watching the thoughts as an observer, or watching the fluctuation of the mind. And so this is pratyahara. All right. Anybody have any questions or comments so far? I don't want to go too fast or go too deep. Anybody have anything? Questions, comments?
A question.
Yep.
So, and you know what, it might not be appropriate. So if it's not appropriate instruction, just we'll deal with it another time. But to, for lack of a better term, undercut the relaxation and peacefulness that many of us associate with meditation, and then to juxtapose that against not having these vivid, vivid visions, or, even some of us get parables downloaded. When we don't go from one extreme to the other, how do we, what is meditation in between those two? If relaxation and clear mind is not it, and if I'm not one that's having these vivid, experiences, what's the middle way on that, if it doesn't derail you too far?
No, it's not. That's a perfect question, actually. So, again, this is a formula or a path to get us to a certain point. And so, with this pratyahara, this is the withdrawal of the senses and literally watching the thoughts. And so, people do experience that physical relaxation, that peace, which is cool. Like, it's literally nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine. But just, for everybody, even though that is a byproduct of intentionally practicing this, is not the goal. And so if we are stuck at just experiencing physical relaxation, then that means that there is more work that needs to be done. And so, in researching this, one of the formulas or things that is said is that we should be able to sit still in meditation with no movement for 3 hours. But and this is another piece too, that people grossly overestimate themselves when it comes to meditation. So, for example, if we took a said person and we said, "Hey, can you lift 300 pounds?" and they say, "No, I can't lift 300 pounds." But if we say, "Can you sit in meditation for 30 minutes?" they'll probably say yes. And so, but as we walk down this path, because we are getting to what meditation actually is, and that's coming. So I don't want to give away too much too early, but as we walk towards that path of meditation, you'll see what meditation actually is and what meditation is not. And so if we only experience physical relaxation, that's just a signal to say there's more work to be done. We really have to get a hold on its mind. And I'm glad you said that, because it brought me to, or made me think about a point that I wanted to mention that I hadn't mentioned yet. So remember, we talked about yoga having 2 definitions. And so the first definition that was given by Patanjali is that yoga is the, chitta vritti nirodha, or the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. And we also said that yoga means to yoke. And so we showed in the intro presentation that device, that yoke, where it brings 2 things together. And so we talked about it as a unification device between the Atman and the Brahman, or the individual self and the pervading consciousness or universal self. But what's not mentioned is that even though it brings 2 things together, it's also a device that allows for control. And so when we bring those 2 things together, there is also a rope that controls, the happenings of the 2 things that are brought together. And so that control piece is where we are going. So if you're only experiencing physical relaxation, that means you don't yet have control of the mind. And so this is the steps to get that control back. So this is literally the yoke or the rope for the mind.
Copy that. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? All right, let's move forward. All right, so the last three rungs are kind of like the upper level of this, and so I'm gonna mention them together, and then we're gonna break them down one by one. So the last three rungs of yoga, or of Raja Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, are Dharana, which is concentration, Dhyana, which is meditation, and Samadhi, or absorption, are the last three rungs of the 8 limbs of yoga. So Dharana, which is concentration, is the process of holding or fixing the attention of the mind onto one object or place. And so you see how the way we teach meditation is working you towards Dharana, because we focus you on the breath. So we give you an object of concentration. So that is Dharana. Dhyana is what we just talked about, which is actual meditation. So meditation is number 7 in the 8 rungs, and that's sustained concentration, whereby the attention continues to hold or repeat the same object or place. So it means it's literally not going anywhere. And then Samadhi is deep absorption, wherein only the essence of that object, place, or point shines forth in the mind, as if the mind were devoid of even its own form. So that is giving you the, where we're going, the goal, that Samadhi. And these are the stages of attention that progressively move inward. So attention, which is pratyahara, leads to concentration, which is dharana. Concentration leads to meditation, dhyana, and meditation or dhyana leads to absorption, which is samadhi. So now you literally have a systematic path. And so the knowledge about these things now helps you to identify where you are. So it literally directly speaks to your question that you just asked. So if you are only experiencing relaxation, you can see like, oh yeah, I'm on the lower rungs. If I get to a point where I'm seeing the thoughts, but I'm unable to concentrate, you are still stuck on pratyahara. You haven't made it to dharana. If you are good at the concentration, but the concentration is not sustained, you are stuck on dharana and you haven't made it to dhyana or meditation. And if you can do those things, but not for a long period of time, then you haven't made it to samadhi. You are stuck in dhyana. So it's literally a systematic path that allows you to point exactly to where you are in this ladder of, this 8-rung ladder that we call Ashtanga Yoga. So remember, we had this picture, right, of pratyahara, where we are literally looking at the waves or the vrittis and the chitta. So now we have dharana. Can somebody read this for me, please?
I got you, instructor.
Thank you.
Dharana is the 6th limb of yoga, and the essence means one-pointed attention, teaching us how to focus our attention on the present moment. In dhyana, gain insightful awareness, whereby we can control over our responses and reactions. Through its regular practice, we come to understand the nature of things, the impermanence of our corporeal existence, corporeal existence, the fluctuations of our minds, the source of our own suffering, and its possible resolution.
Perfect, thank you. So we see now how we transcend, and remember, we only on the 6th limb, but literally, if we can get this, you can see how we transcend that human condition of suffering and impermanence and, you know, our corporeal existence and the fluctuations of the mind, which is, you know, what it is to be human. So now we start to transcend from man to God once we start to get to this dharana stage, or the sixth limb of yoga, which is one-pointed attention. And so the pictures are very important because, again, here we are watching the waves, and then you can see now we have one pointed mindfulness, or one big wave, right? Which is dharana, or one-pointed attention. So we have, you know, especially coming off the last series, we have tools that we can use to create this vritti in our mind, this one-pointed attention, or this single-minded focus, right? So, you know, we are revisiting this. One of the tools is the mantra. So can somebody read this for me, please?
I got it. A mantra is a spiritual sound vibration that purifies the consciousness and awakens the love of God. The Vedas recommend the chanting of mantras as the easiest method of for this age to attain spiritual realization. Om is a direct path. Remembering the sound vibration of Om or Om, along with a deep feeling for the meaning of what it represents, brings both the realization of the individual self and the removal of obstacles that normally block the realization. In a sense, this practice is like a shortcut that it goes directly to the heart of the process. This practice takes one on a direct route inward, systematically piercing the levels of consciousness. It is done with the sincerity and dedication towards the unattained creative source or pure consciousness, which Om represents. That consciousness contains the seed of omniscience, which is the source of the teachings of all ancient sages. The sacred word designating this creative source is the sound Om, called Pranava. And I'm not going to do the other part.
Yeah, don't even read it. Perfect. Yep. So that's one tool that we have to single-pointed mindedness, right? So we can focus on that mantra. We gave an actual definition for mantra, which is a spiritual sound vibration that purifies the consciousness and awakens the love of God. And so this is the symbolic representation of the word Om. And if you look at the Mandukya Upanishad, it talks about this Om. And Om is literally broken into 4 parts. And so the first part of the Om, which is the A, which is the waking state, the conscious mind, and the gross world. And then the U is the dream state, or the active unconscious, or the subtle world. And then the M is the deep sleep state, the latent unconscious, or the causal plane. And the last part is what people never think about. It's the space between Oms. So when we chant Om, there is a transitional period from one Om to the other Om. And that's what this part is. So that's the 4th state, which is absolute reality, pure consciousness. And it's the unification between Atman and Brahman, aka the big S self. And so now you start to see the power of the Om. It's not just a word, it's not just a chant, it's literally a direct route to piercing the levels of consciousness. So as they say, put some respect on it, because it's not anything to be played with, or it's not anything to be taken lightly. And we have another tool, visualization. So this is the mantra. The second tool is visualization. Somebody read that for me, so no hard words in there.
Visual meditation, such as focusing on a single candle flame, can enhance your practice of single-pointed awareness. When the room is dark, you can focus on the flickering light and train the mind to filter out everything else. Another form of visual meditation is using a yantra or visual mantra. Mandalas are art forms of geometric shapes, which you can use for your visual meditation.
Perfect. Yep. So this is the Sri Yantra, which is a very sacred symbol, and it's a whole lot of sacred geometry in there. And then you can see the lotus around it, and also another sacred symbol around that. And then these are the mandalas, which are art forms of geometric shapes. And you can also utilize these inside of meditation, as well as use these to unlock certain things. So, you know, there are a lot of hidden meanings and hidden knowledge inside of these. So you can use these inside of your meditation. And again, it is in the name of this single-minded point of awareness, right? So we have some tools that we can use, which is the mantra and the mandala or the Sri Yantra. All right, anybody have any questions or comments on these thus far? So we just did 6 out of the 8.
No comments per se, but I sent you 2 pictures. Is it possible for you to share those and explain that experience, please?
You talking about the meditation pictures?
Yes, sir.
Hold on 1 second. So yes, I can do that. Let me do this next one, and then we'll go right to that because it's right in line with what we about to talk about right now.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you. All right. Anybody else questions or comments?
Instructor, I don't understand. Is a yantra? I've always been confused. Is yantra the same as mandala? Are they one and the same, or does it mean something different? Yantra.
So the yantra is specifically this symbol, and it is a mandala. So, like, for example, how a Ford Explorer is a car, it's the same thing as this. This would be the Ford Explorer, and the yantra would be the car.
Thank you. I have never heard it said that way. That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Appreciate you. Anybody else, questions or comments? All right, moving forward. So we are now at the stage of meditation or dhyana. So can somebody read that for me? No hard words in there.
The repeated continuation or uninterrupted stream of that one point of focus is called absorption in meditation, dhyana, and is the 7th of the 8 steps. The repeated concentration on one object of concentration is meditation. Typically, there is a moment of concentration where there are no distractions. Then a moment later, a distraction comes. Then attention lets go of the distraction and returns to the object of concentration. However, when that distraction does not happen, that continued concentration on the one object is called meditation.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. So now we literally have a definition of meditation and what meditation is. So I know for a lot of people, meditation is like this esoteric, new age, out there thing. Maybe, maybe not. But now we are systematizing and giving an exact definition and practice to meditation and what meditation is, where we're going in meditation. So, we literally taking away the question about what meditation is, and we are specifically speaking directly to what meditation is. And so now you see this picture, and this is the chitta without any vrittis, which is AKA meditation. All right, so dhyana or meditation is the conscious maintenance of a steady stream of the same thought about an object at a higher center of consciousness. What we call thinking is the manipulation of a series of thought waves or vrittis. The mind has two tendencies. Its natural tendency is to move constantly from one thought wave to another. This tendency to grasp diverse objects is called all-pointedness, which is the regular operation of people who aren't meditating or people who are new in meditation. That is the natural state of the mind. But occasionally, the mind holds onto a single object. This tendency is called one-pointedness. Dhyana or meditation is a special type of one-pointedness or one-pointed activity of the mind. Can somebody read this one for me, please?
Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 12 through 13. The yogi should strive to purify the mind by focusing it in meditation with one-pointed concentration, controlling all thoughts and activities. He must hold the body, neck, and head firmly in a straight line and gaze at the tip of the nose without allowing the eyes to wander.
Perfect. So you see, we brought it right back to the Gita, and they talk directly about meditation, and they tell you how meditation should be. So the body, the neck, and the head firmly in a straight line. So if you notice, all of the postures that we have given you of meditation satisfy those criteria. So we start you with lion meditation. And when you're lying down, the body, the neck, and the head are firmly in a straight line. And then we have you sit up, cross the legs, rest the hands on the legs, and the body, the head, the neck are again in a straight line. And then we stand you up and put you in embracing the tree. And again, the body, the head, and the neck are in a straight line. So you can see what we teach is right in line with, the methodology that has been set forth in the Bhagavad Gita. All right, this is a bit long. Can we have two people read this? So one person read for Krishna and then one person read for Arjuna.
I could take Krishna.
I could do Arjuna.
Cool.
Yeah, we got the same people volunteering. Everybody else must be asleep.
All right. Lord Krishna said, one does not become a renunciate by merely not lighting the fire or by abstaining from work. For the wise who seek to attain equanimity of mind, selfless service is said to be the means. Equanimity leads to self-realization. One attains perfection by renouncing attachment to the fruit of work and to selfish desire. One can elevate or degrade oneself by one's own mind. The mind becomes a friend to the one who has control over it and an enemy to the one who is controlled by the mind. Perceive the same self or spirit abiding in every being and all beings abiding in the self. Those who see me in everything and see everything in me are not separated from me, and I am not separated from them. Undoubtedly, O Arjuna, the mind is restless and very difficult to control, but it can be subdued by sincere spiritual practice by detachment.
Arjuna said, the faithful one who deviates from the path of meditation due to an unsubdued mind. What is the destination of such a person, O Krishna? Does he not perish like a despairing cloud? O Krishna, having lost both heavenly and worldly pleasures without support and bewildered on the path of self-realization.
There is no destruction, O Arjuna, for the one who tries to attain perfection either here or hereafter. A transcendentalist is never put to grief. My dear friend, the less evolved, unsuccessful one is reborn in the house of the pious and prosperous after attaining heaven and living there for many years. The highly evolved, unsuccessful one does not go to heaven, but is born in a spiritual advanced family. A birth like that is very difficult to obtain in this world. There, one regains the knowledge acquired in the previous life and strives again to achieve perfection. O Arjuna, the most devoted of all is the one who lovingly remembers me with faith and whose mind is ever absorbed in me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it was definitely a whole lot in there. But, I just want to take the time to basically bring out this part. So, when I read this, it brought me to us, to our group. And so the highly evolved but unsuccessful one does not go to heaven, but is born in a spiritually advanced family. A birth like that is very difficult to obtain in this world. And so, I feel that, our past lives, so to speak, have been unsuccessful in attaining, God realization. But yet, I believe that we have or will achieve it in this lifetime. And so, just illustrating the fact of how lucky we are to be born in a spiritually advanced family such as the one we have right here. And so everybody, as we see, it's only 32 people on this call, but this call is literally putting forth the information that we can use to transcend death, or what people would call death. But yet it's, a very small amount of people on here, but important people and, big people nonetheless. So, just using this to appreciate each and every person that has been here and that has been here since day one. Anybody have any questions, comments, anything?
Instructor.
Yep.
I had something really interesting happen today. Mm-hmm. So I'm minding my own business on doing some construction work in the house by myself, no music on, no nothing, just like moving meditation. The spirit tells me to look up the word labadee. It takes me to labadist. I don't have my phone. Hold on one second. Labadist. And the labadist, let's see here. One sec. It was about a group of super pious individuals in the 17th and 18th century who were basically known for their zeal and intention to align their consciousness with God. That's a paraphrase because I don't have the exact definition in front of me. I took a snapshot.
Why you ain't dropped it in the chat yet?
Yeah, I took a snapshot with my phone, but my phone is on the charge in a different place right now. But it resonated with me, obviously, all alone. It just dropped in my head. But to hear this bring us back to, i.e. being born into a family, us being peculiar and set apart. I just had to share that, statistically impossible coincidence. You know what I mean?
Wow, I know you got chills after reading that.
Exactly. I mean, just a strange
to
word.
hear this, right? To hear this.
Exactly. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I tell you about a word that I had got too. We low on time right now, but I'm gonna tell you about a word that came to my head too, which was again statistically impossible, and it took me because it was actually two names that came in my head, but I've never heard it before, and so I couldn't spell it, and then I finally seen it on a video, and I was like, oh my god, there's no way that I could have just came up with this out of my head, but I'll tell you later.
I say.
All right. Yep. So meditation thus acts as a great junction where all spiritual paths converge, meet, go together for a short distance, and then diverge again to their respective goals. Meditation may also be compared to a broad road having several tracks or lanes marked on them for the guidance of the motorist. Each meditator keeps to his own lane, but all the lanes are parts of a great highway. Meditation is the result of the focusing of consciousness on its true source or center. According to Patanjali, before one attempts dhyana meditation, one should gain proficiency in dharana, aka concentration or fixing the mind, and pratyahara, which is withdrawing the mind from external objects. This withdrawal is defined by Patanjali as a state in which the senses, detached from external objects, become one with the manas, or the mind. When this is practiced for a long time, the mind alone remains active, and only then true meditation is possible. Even when the aspirant does not succeed in having perfect meditation, the presence of a central focus within gives a sense of unity and integrity to his whole person. And this helps the aspirant to remain unaffected by the changes and troubles of the external world. When the aspirant gains proficiency in it, meditation becomes a direct means for the spiritual experience. And so I hope everybody can see how the importance of meditation, because if people practice meditation in mass, then a lot of the quote unquote problems that we have would not be there, because the aspirant remains unaffected by the changes and troubles of the external world, which is huge. And a lot of people, are affected by what's going on and what's in the media and the news and et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we headed. So the 8 limbs of yoga are interrelated and are not meant to be practiced in isolation. The purpose of yoga is to control the fluctuations of the chitta, or aka chitta vritti nirodha, and facilitate its stability by cultivating purity through a cleansing process, so that one may become absorbed in oneself and realize his true identity. Of the 8-fold yoga, meditation, dhyana, is the second to last limb, preceded by Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, and is followed by Samadhi. All the limbs are important and complementary. In other words, success in meditation depends upon the progress achieved in the other areas, especially the ones preceding it in the order. So in the case of Samadhi, which is not possible unless there is perfection in all the other areas of yoga, in the 3rd section of the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali defines dhyana as the steady and continuous flow of awareness toward the same point. And so now we should have a deep and thorough understanding of what meditation is and what meditation is not, and the steps leading to meditation. So it's literally a systematic practice or treatise for what meditation is and what meditation is not. So, anybody have any questions or comments before we get to the last rung? All right, no questions or comments. Proceeding forward. Man, I wish John was here because I know he would have a whole lot of questions and comments. But Samadhi, which is found in 3.3 of Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It is absorption, which occurs when the observer, the process being observed, the process of observing and the observer, this should be the observed with a D, sorry. Samadhi is absorption, which occurs when the observer, the process of observing, and the observed, all three seem to collapse into one, wherein there seems to be only the object in existence. So we kind of talked about this in Jnana Yoga, but you can see how all of the paths kind of lead to the same point. So you see that absorption. And so you see how this picture is literally being absorbed in the chitta, right? So literally at this point, the observer, the process of observing, and the observed are all one thing. So I thought this was the perfect picture to illustrate that. Can somebody read this one for me, please?
With meditation, there is still an observer observing and observed. When the observer becomes so absorbed in the process of observing the object that there seems to be only the object. That is the beginning of samadhi. Samadhi.
Yeah.
Samadhi. It is as if the observer, the process of observing, and the object being observed, all three collapse in such a way that the only thing remaining is the object. When this deep absorption happens, meditation becomes samadhi. The ability to allow concentration to go into meditation and to then allow meditation to go into samadhi is the process called samyama. Samyama, okay.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So now we also have a distinction between what meditation is and what samadhi is. So you can see how we walk right into the 8 limbs. And next week is going to be the conclusion of this yoga series. And we are going to focus on this samyama. And if anybody reads the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, most of chapter 4 is dedicated to the process of samyama, which is the combination of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi all together. Emerson, you had a question?
Yep. So this object has to be of the internal. So flame practice cannot get us to pratyahara or samadhi, correct?
No, it can. Definitely can. It doesn't have to be, remember we said with here tools. So we can use the flame, the single candle flame, as a tool to get us to single pointed awareness, the same way we can use the breath. And then at some point, we transcend the need for that external object and we become one with that object, so to speak. And so there is a merger of individual consciousness in that object, as well as all the other objects that are, in and around you. So we literally, figuratively break that glass, so to speak. So there's no inside and there's no outside. Anybody else had any questions, comments about this?
I just thought it was like kind of like interesting how, how like, I can't say how you, but like sometimes you be watching TV or something and you so focused on it and you so like concentrated that like you don't even realize what's going on around you, and you do that subconsciously, but how much more difficult it is to do it when you're doing it intentionally. And so that's what just came to my mind.
For sure, yeah. So you see that it is possible. And we've all done it. We've all been so absorbed in a TV show or a song that we don't hear somebody calling our name, for example. So, we all have experienced it. So now it's just about being on purpose and being intentional about that, and also being intentional about the sense object that we use to get to that state. So not a TV show or not a song, but maybe the Om, or maybe the candle flame, or maybe the Sri Yantra, like, just being intentional. And so this is actually a verse from the Bible, Psalms 46:10. Be still and know that I, capital I, am God, capital G. So it literally points you right to meditation. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Because we
Yeah, I have a question.
move towards the conclusion. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So because considering the posture and being still, but then considering the flame striking, I'm gonna say, can we meditate in motion?
So two things. So the answer is yes. But the striking of the candle flame and the candle flame meditation is two distinct practices. So one, you literally just use the candle flame as an object for meditation, and the other is a martial practice as well as a meditative practice. So it's twofold, but short answer, yes, you can definitely do that. And we do have a practice of moving meditation.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenyatta. You had a question, Kenyatta? All right. If not, Aaron, you had a question?
I don't know. What is the name for it? Someone could be talking to me and just out of nowhere, I'm zoned out somewhere. And I want to just be talking, but I'm zoned out and focused on it's not an object. It's just out and wherever. And I can tell somebody, wait a minute, I'm going through something right now. But it's like a state that I'm in, but I don't know what it is. But it's a state that I kind of want to stay in, and I'm aware of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And again, so now we actually have distinctions between these different states. So now you can reflect and say, am I watching my thoughts? And if so, then it's pratyahara. Am I concentrating on one object? If so, it's dhyana. Am I concentrating on no object? Now it's dhyana. So, it just depends on where you are in that whole, scheme of things that the 8 rungs. So you just have to reflect. And obviously, in that particular situation, you are present in the moment. So to figure it out, you'll have to reflect back to say, where was I in those pieces of the ladder? But yeah, that's definitely an excellent question and observation. Sharissa?
So kind of to piggyback off of what she was saying.
Veggie back. Want to do pig?
Oh, my apologies. What's the right thing to say so I don't ever say that again?
Veggie back, vegan back.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. To veggie back off of what the young lady was saying, I've found myself in spaces where when I was in situations where things were not trauma associated, but harder times, I found myself able to put myself in those meditative spaces and and try to get to, well, not try, but actually gain control of the surrounding that I was in or the situation that I was in to not only bring perspective, but calming to myself and directly to those around me. But I'm not sure if it relates to direct meditation or it's just a spiritual thing.
So my commentary is that they are not mutually exclusive. They are inclusive with one another. So it's not like, oh yeah, this spiritual thing over here or meditation over here. Is like, oh, meditation is a spiritual act. And so that's kind of what we've been walking towards in this whole thing, is that it's only spirit. So
and I have realized that along the way with reading and going over, not just during these lessons, but going back afterwards and listening to it, it's a direct correlation to spirituality and things like that. But I'm really new to the educational portion of it. I was just doing the act of meditation, to be honest. And without knowledge, really, I find myself being very aware that I wasn't doing anything but being still.
Sure, yep. So that's the beauty of these classes. And in India or in Hinduism, they use the word guru, but we'll just say teacher. That's the importance of you being at the 36th chamber, because now you actually have a teacher to guide you and give you directions, and because we have a axiom that says a mirror cannot see itself. And so you may feel like, oh yeah, my back is straight, my head is straight, my neck is straight, but we may be looking at you and we come and adjust you. So that's the importance of having a guru or a teacher or a sensei, whatever word you want to use. And it's speaking directly to that. But we only have 7 minutes left, so let me go ahead and finish this, and then we can have some commentary afterwards. So hopefully everybody remembers the parable that we talked about in the intro class about the blind men and the elephant. And so just to give a quick background, all of these men were blind and they were tasked with washing an elephant. And so after they were finished washing the elephant, they had a conversation about the nature of the elephant and what the elephant is. And so everybody had a perspective on what an elephant is, but even though it was true, it wasn't the truth. And so like the person that was washing the legs, he'd say, oh yeah, elephant is like, a big tree trunk. And the person that was washing the ears said, the elephant is like a fan. And so everybody had their own interpretation. And even though it was true, it wasn't the truth. And what made it not the truth is that they didn't have the whole picture. And so where we are headed is that you all did not have the whole picture of what yoga is, and it was intentional. I intentionally kept it from you so that we can get to the truth. So here it is. So we said in Sutra 1.2, yoga is the control of the modifications of the mind, right? Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha. But that was only 1.2. 1.3 says, then the seer abides in itself, resting in its own nature, which is called self-realization. So that is adding to Sutra 1.2. So yoga is the control of the mind, and when you control the mind, the seer now abides in itself, resting in its own nature, and it's called self with a capital S. self-realization. And at other times, which is 1.4, at other times, when one is not in self-realization, the seer appears to take the form of the modifications of the mind field, taking on the identity of those thought patterns. You see this word vritti? So here, yoga is the control of the mind. When the mind is controlled, the seer abides in itself. And at other times, when it's not abiding in itself, the seer appears to take on the form of the modifications of the mind field, aka the vrittis, and taking on the identity of those thought patterns, right? So the true self shines through. Once the obstacles and the false identities have been temporarily set aside, the true self, which has been there all along, naturally comes shining through, aka 1.3, which is what we just talked about. The rest of the time, we are so entangled with our false identities that we literally do not see that this misidentification happens. 1.4. It is the reason that sometimes it is said that we are asleep and that we need to awaken. The awakening of the self is the true meaning of yoga. Now that's a mic drop, because what this is saying is that when we ask who you are, and the ego says, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm Black, I'm a man, you know, I'm 30 years old. All of that is just chitta vritti, period. That's it. It's modifications of the mind. It's identifying with that false ego. It's identifying with Maya, which is not true, which is a false identity. And we don't see it because we are so entangled in Maya or illusion. So much so that you are asleep, right? And the awakening to the self is the meaning of yoga. And so, you know, I like to bring modern science into this. So this is from Time magazine, and the article is called The Fleeting Flesh. And I appreciate the 30 people on here, because whoever left, they didn't get the full thing. So the fleeting flesh, about 98% of our atoms in the human body are renewed each year. This surprising fact is discussed by Dr. Paul C. Abersold of Oak Ridge in the latest annual report of the Smithsonian Institution. The doctor said, based on his conclusion on experiments with radioisotopes, which trace the movements of chemical elements in and out of the body, the fastest changing component is water. It forms about 70% of the body, and about half of the water molecules are replaced every 8 days. Other fleeting elements are carbon, sodium, potassium. The calcium and phosphorus in the bones and teeth stay longer, but even they aren't permanent. Bones are quite dynamic. The little crystals in bones are continually dissolving and reforming. In the process, some of the atoms are lost. Some of the brain tissue, though soft and juicy, are more permanent than bone. One of the most permanent elements is iron. The iron atom stays the same in the body for a long time. And Dr. Abersold believes that 2% of the body's substance is an ample allowance for the part that sticks around for as long as a year. A human body, he says, should not be considered permanent in a material sense. It is more like a famous old regiment, and this is like a military regiment, or if you could think of anything that is an umbrella, so like a basketball team or a bank or a university, where the members change over time, but it's still that thing. So even though the Pistons of 2021 are different from the Pistons of 1988, it's still the Pistons. In a larger sense, says Dr. Abersold, the atoms that each human body is made of were once part of other living organisms like dogs, whales, birds, and the atoms that made up Plato and Henry VIII are still floating around as parts of people now living. So this literally is showing you how, one, the temporary and illusory nature of the body, because, I call myself Keith, but what is Keith? Because my atoms, 98% of my atoms are renewed every year. So if we have a car, for example, and we replace all of the parts on the car, is that car still the same car? And if not, when did that car become a new car? And so that is showing you that the only thing that is constant is the mind. So AKA all is mind. And that's all I got. Questions, comments?
Mic drop. That
Definitely.
component right there takes away any excuse for us not to be able to change or modify or improve any aspects of ourselves, period. And it don't have to take a long time. We set our minds to it. You can move and be whatever it is you desire to be.
I say instructor. Cool. But that's a lot of steps to a lot of steps right there though. But like you said, if I do just put my mind to it and get through it, I know I'm gonna come out.
For sure, nothing to worry about. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Instructor, if you could share that photo.
Oh yeah, I got you.
Two photos. I'd like to make a comment on that.
Okay, got you. I was gonna say while I'm doing this, anybody else can come with questions or comments.
Peace, family. This whole thing just was very befitting for me. I don't remember which leg it was, but it spoke about going outside of self. And until I started the whole journey with 36 chambers, I knew nothing about the ego and, how to check the ego, how to even recognize what was ego, what to take away, and what to, just how to fix things. But what I'm experiencing now with the whole thing, and even knowing to be able to put together the words and the actions of what I may be going through, this whole thing is an awakening. It's just a whole awakening for me. And I'm going through that awakening process, and the deprogramming, I think, is the most toughest part of it, is deprogramming and going outside of self to get like this rebirth, if you will, of the whole yoga and these steps to better self. So this was very great, and I'm very grateful and thankful for this lesson. So thank you, instructor.
Thank you. I appreciate you. All right, anybody else?
Yes, I just want to say, well, first of all, my name is Amin. I was invited to this Zoom call, so this is my first time actually hearing this talk. So I want to say thank you to the instructor and to the questions and answers. That last little segment that you just did was fire. Pretty good, man. Like how you broke that down. So I've been taking a lot of screenshots on a lot of stuff because I want to go back over what you're talking about. But I look forward to joining you guys' Zooms again, and this was very inspirational. So I appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you. We appreciate you. And this video will be on YouTube. So if you want to go back and check it out, it'll definitely be there. All right. Anybody else?
Peace, instructor.
Peace.
Peace, everyone. Phenomenal, man. Phenomenal work, brother. You have a knack for taking complicated concepts and bringing them down to a practical level. You know, not everyone can do that, and you know, you do it so very well. And I was wondering if somehow, you know, this wouldn't be the end of this. You know, not saying, you should continue to 4 more weeks, but at some point, you know, diving in some of these a little bit more, because I'm sure there's layers to this, obviously, and I think opening it up more, I think not only would it be beneficial to all of us, but I would definitely be interested in learning more about it. So it's just a suggestion. And that's all I have, brother. Thank you so much. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, this definitely was just scratching the surface, giving, intro to a subject and topics that, a lot of people don't have any knowledge about. And so hopefully my aim was to clear up a lot of, misidentifications about what yoga is and what it's not. And I do have 1 more week. So, even though this is the last yoga in the series, we are definitely going to do a conclusion and, we're going to dive deep and really show and prove this stuff. And so, but, I'm definitely open to doing a 201 or a graduate course on yoga too, because this was just like the intro, but a lot of stuff I did have to leave out and not mention because I didn't want to convolute the presentations too much. So, but yeah, I'm definitely open to that. So more to come. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Hey, one more thing. Is there a Facebook group or Instagram, or can it be posted? Can somebody post it into the chat so it can be followed? Or do you have an Instagram or anything that can be posted so I can follow you?
Yep, yeah. Everything is 36 Chamber University, but I'm putting it in the chat too. So Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of that is all 36 Chamber University. Yeah, and I put it in the chat for you. You can go ahead, instructor.
Okay. I'd just like to note here that first comment that the series was phenomenal. I mean, it has done a lot for me, as well as all who have listened and participated in what we were getting. And while you were on the one about the waves and the water, it reminded me of these pictures. So as you were talking about it, I was like, wow, this reminded me of a practice that, I had these 2 young people at the time doing. Now, for those of you who don't know who these 2 people are, that's Jalen and Instructor North, Keith. And the practice here was to choose a wave and follow it all the way to Canada and back. So this was, in essence, one of the practices that he described. And lo and behold, he's teaching about it now. So I wanted to show evidence that this is not theoretical for him, that he's actually practiced this, whether knowingly or not. You know, so this is evidence of, man, he actually practiced this and has been practicing it for years. He just didn't have the language of what we were actually doing. But now we're at a point to where now we understand what it is that we had been guided through. And again, this is one of our sessions at the 36th Chamber when it was on Iron Street. And we would go out and we would meditate, we would exchange, we would fight, we would do all of these things right out in front of the Detroit River. And this is right off of the Detroit River. Before, I think this was before, was it before all of that stuff was put up there?
Yeah, before the Riverwalk and all of that,
Yeah. So this was a minute ago. So again, I just wanted to show you guys and show that this is not theoretical. This is actual practice. This is some items. These are some things that were actually practiced and not just, we just talking about it in this theory. So again, I think it's, one way to end this is to show that, whoa, that's him right there actually practicing it. So again, man, great job, proud of you. And looking forward to, how you wrap this up in the conclusion. So again, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And definitely appreciate you bringing back these pictures and memories. And, just what most people don't know, it was probably like 10 degrees outside when we was doing this too. So
oh yeah,
a lot of times it was winter time. So.
Oh yeah, it was cold outside.
Wasn't like a nice summer, 80-degree day.
Oh yes, sir. Sir. I know. Brought it back.
Exactly. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Anybody else? Questions, comments, anything for the good of the order?
You 1 in a billion, instructor. 1 in a billion.
Oh man, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Well, if nobody has anything, we can call it a night. And see you next week on Tuesday, 8 o'clock.
Thank you, instructor.
Peace. Good night, everybody.
Peace, instructor.
Peace.
Peace and love.